Following the release of the RP-F1 in 1991, the RP-F30 was released in 1993, one of my favorite years for vintage headphones. Like the F1, it also houses dual coaxial drivers, but this time in its full-sized, closed-back format. While the design and build quality of the F30 doesn't appear much to behold at a glance, I'm certain that much to the delight of discerning audiophiles, it represented something of a milestone in high-end audio reproduction. The overall build of the headphone is a fairly typical simple plastic construction with no obviously innovative elements. The plastic headband is supported by a suspension strap, which is always great to see, and actually something of a rarity in the full-size, closed-back headphone realm. The plastic cups are bottomed with large rubber parts that apparently do nothing as far as I can tell. I guess the extra rubber mass does some mechanical damping, but I can't imagine that that was its purpose. The simple pseudo ball and socket connection to the cups is a welcome feature. Definitely something I'm always happy to see on a headphone for their simplicity and consistency in clamping pressure. The very first hint of something different are the gold accents on the headband, which are actually bass tuning ports. You'd be forgiven for thinking they were anything more than a decorative afterthought. Removing the ear pads revealed the second hint of a sleeper headphone. The 30mm drivers are almost entirely surrounded by a thick layer of tuning foam, which distracts you from the tiny bass duct just beside the driver. Opening up the headphone is easy with only a few screws in the way. Inside the cups, the scale and magnitude of the design becomes more apparent. Behind the 30mm driver lies the 50mm driver, acting as a subwoofer, and we can also see the design of the rear volume and the bass porting design. I think almost any modern headphone enthusiast wouldn't look twice at this plastic relic, but in reality, it's very close to the ultimate sleeper build. There is no doubt in my mind that this was the ultimate average consumer high-end audiophile closed-back headphone of its day. Meanwhile, the Sony R10 was quietly reigning supreme at the summit where most mortals never dared to look, and the biodynamic DT770 was not the first choice for the average consumer, it being a relatively contemporary addition to Biodynamic Studio line 8 years prior in 1985, so it had not yet achieved the legendary status it has today. Depending on what music you put on first, there may be one of three things that immediately hit you. Either the mid-range, the treble, or the bass. All three are not just prominent in different ways, but seductive, and for the most part tastefully tuned. While that comes with a big asterisk, it's mostly tasteful in the way that the upper bass and very low mids are scooped, removing any chance of the sound becoming overly lush, thick, slow, and congested. It's a completely unique tuning that kind of reminds me of a small set of bookshelf speakers combined with a subwoofer, and even more like how many good modern multiple driver IEMs are tuned today. While the bass does not live up to the standards of modern high-end tactility, detail, and objective quality, it doesn't have to, because good closed-back dynamic bass is not the same as good open-back planar bass. Open-back planar bass, when done correctly, is typically dry, textured fast, and a bit clinical. Closed-back dynamic bass, when it's done right, is lush, thick, a bit slow, punchy, slammy, and deeply thunderous, and so much fun. Aside from the Fostex TH900 Mark II, this is among the most satisfying bass I've ever heard, but it's still not without its flaws. Specifically, I don't know if the bass was originally stronger than this, because half of the tuning foam is missing, which means there's a good chance it was. I do prefer to give these a little bass boost, otherwise the mid-range is just too overpowering. After correction, the bass has all the sub-bass thunder you could hope for from a modern-day, high-end, closed-back headphone, without the mid-bass boom or congestion. It really has been very carefully tuned to give the very best strong bass performance that this driver is capable of. I know this because I've heard all the best ones: the Victor HPD 900, Technics RP-F1, the Pioneer SE 900D, and the Pioneer SEM 870. The mid-range is very odd. On one hand, it is prominently boosted at 2 kHz, which does add that seductive layer I previously mentioned that pushes vocals and instruments to the front, but on the other, there's the upper mid-range peak from hell, which actually sounds more like a shelf when I do manual tone sweeps. Thankfully, since it's pretty much an entire shelf of treble from 6 to 11 kHz, bringing down the entire treble by about 6 to 8 decibels does wonders for cleaning it up without feeling like there's any significant loss of detail or tone. The only 2 headphones I have at hand worth comparing this to are 2 other legendary historical studio closedbacks. The Sony MDR CD900. Comparing only the uncontaminated stock sound of both headphones, again with an asterisk because the F30 does not have the original pads and half the foam is missing, there is still, quite frankly, no competition. The CD900 is the obvious winner with its totally coherent, balanced, extended, and detailed sound. The F30 in tuning alone is about 2 or 3 ranks below, but in every other regard, it's almost on par or exceeds the CD900, especially in soundstage. After tone correction, the F30 edges ahead of the CD900 in musical presentation, which is a horrible phrase that simply means that it sounds more enjoyable and lively to me, because the CD900 sounds more flat, like a tool for reproducing music recordings, and it just lacks some character. The Victor HAD900. The Victor benefits from roughly the same treble reduction as the F30, but already sounds more balanced and coherent before tone correction. After correction, the F30 is preferable if the main goal is sub-bass. If you actually want to listen to a wider range of music, the D900 is still a better performer, but it still doesn't have the tonal mastery exhibited by the CD900. In 1993, the RP-F30 took the lead in having the best boosted subwoofer-like bass reproduction of any headphone on Earth. After simple tone correction, like I've been using, let alone careful EQing, I can see this as having been one of the very best closed-back headphones at the time, regardless of price. Panasonic did wonders with the bass, but missed an opportunity with the rest of the tonal response, something they seem to have consistently done up until modern releases such as the Panasonic HD10, which suffered similarly from a strange mid-range hump, and the Technics EAH-T700, which in some ways measured kind of similarly to the F30, but since it was so much more extreme, it was an absolute acoustic disaster. I can only assume that Panasonic's headphone division has always been a low priority, and the big irony is that some of Panasonic's better sounding headphones have traditionally been among their cheapest, such as the RP-HCX7, the RP-HT360, and the really rather tasty RP-HX650K, which used the same Fostex drivers as the Creative or Vana Live. I hope that Panasonic and Technics are able to produce something great in the future, because the build quality of the EAH-T700 was sublime, aside from the horrid flaky pleather padding, and we know that they've been capable of good design and innovation in the past, but they've never been able to create a single great full-sized headphone yet. Anyway, that's enough for now. Take it easy, and I'll see you in the next one.